Good afternoon. Welcome to Truthzilla. I am Megan, sitting here with my good friends Scott and Ed.
Hello.
Today we have an extra special guest. He is the mastermind, writer, producer, and director behind the wildly popular and now censored From JFK to 9/11, Everything is a Rich Man's Trick, the documentary, Francis Richard Conolly. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, man. This is pretty awesome. Like I feel like I say this to a lot of our guests lately. It's like I've been referencing and telling people about your work for so long, and now here you are. Yeah, so it's definitely so cool. It's quite an honor. You know, I you can't really summarize it any better than what you put. Everything is a rich man's trick, and I think what we're seeing now, just more than ever, like I still think that theory applies to everything that we're seeing in the world today. Maybe just you know, let's get into it here. So what is it that you're seeing in the world today, and in the context of the fact that everything is a rich man's trick? And I know that's a huge, broad question, and we can zero in on certain things as we go along. But kind of where do you want to take us into first here?
Well, I think, Scott, the best place to start, actually, at this time, is with your election.
Yes.
Yeah. You couldn't have a bigger rich man's trick than that. What I'd like to say, and not just to you, but to America, because be aware that you may have millions of people watching you right now. That don't be surprised if that's the case, because if there's one thing that's come out more and more and more, it's the degree to which the establishment is rigging the figures on videos like this. We've had this right from the very beginning. Thank heaven I was interviewed by Andy Young of Raconteurs News right at the very start, because he woke me up to all the tricks that they're playing, and they'll be playing tricks on you. So be aware that millions of Americans will see this on YouTube. I'm quite sure of that. And if we want to talk about rich men's tricks, the thing I'd like to say more than anything tonight to your fellow Americans is, please do not vote. Do not vote in this election. You will be crazy if you do. Whenever I'm doing anything important like this, I always try to find out if my hero, George Orwell, has ever said anything about situations like this. And thank heaven, I found a quote, and there are not many George Orwell quotes that I don't know. But funnily enough, I did find one for this. And the one I came across is Orwell saying, if you vote knowingly for corrupt politicians, you do not make yourself into victims. You make yourselves into accomplices.
Okay. Absolutely.
And do you want to be an accomplice to all the murders, all the extortion, all the planting of landmines that blow the legs off little African boys who are just out playing? They're still doing it. I don't believe there's an American adult who isn't perfectly well aware of what your Central Intelligence Agency does around the world every day. If you vote in this election, because Trump or Biden, it's not going to make a difference. I mean, does anybody really think that if Hillary had won instead of Trump last time, that things would be different to what they are? Please do not vote in this election. It's just another rich man's trick. And if you vote, okay, it might be exciting. It's going to be like a fireworks display for a minute. But I swear you'll wake up on Thursday morning or Friday morning, whenever you get the result, and you'll feel like someone who's had a one-night stand. And, you know, that feeling where you've gone, oh, my God, how could I have done that? How did I ever, you know, that whole thing? I can see from the way that Ed's grinning that he's had this feeling many times, but we won't go into that. But I think you all know what I mean. You're going to wake up on Friday morning thinking, how could I have done that? And you're going to regret it, Because all you'll be saying to the elite class is, hey, we want another 4 years of this. And do you want another 4 years of this? Another 4 years of pandemic, another 4 years of Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew, Ghislaine Maxwell, all the things we're going to talk about?
Yeah.
Don't do it, America.
Don't do it. Don't participate. That's the thing. It's like the whole lesser of two evils. Our guest, I saw a post that our guest we just had posted the video for today. I saw Chris Kirchhoff. I saw his post today. He's like, I don't align myself with evil, period. Right. And so it's just like, that's so on point, man. I feel you. It's a crazy thing though, man. Like, I feel like though, being that it is all a trick and an illusion and theater, right? I feel like this whole thing has been set up in such a way that Trump, like the Democrats threw the fight, the Biden campaign has thrown the fight. They've made themselves so unappealing that there's no way that they're going to get the majority of the votes, and they need Trump to get reelected in order to create the situation that they want to create, which is absolute insurrection, absolute civil unrest, absolute destabilization, in order to so it's basically the problem, reaction, solution. So that's the problem. You create the problem, you have the Trump victory, which will create the reaction, which is complete civil unrest, which is the ultimate goal, the solution, right? To bring in the UN occupation to bring down the fall of America and eliminate American sovereignty. Like, it seems like that almost is kind of a clear picture. What do you think about that?
I find it very interesting, Scott, that this scenario, because I've heard you talk about this before on another broadcast, that you think that they're deliberately going to make things worse so that they'll have the excuse to bring in, more draconian measures, more militarization. Is that what you think?
That's what I see. Yep.
You and Agenda 21.
Yeah. Yep.
Agenda 2030 now.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, it seems like a very real possibility. I mean, if one were to make the assumption that that's the end result, like the collapse of America, the one world government, right? Like, America needs to fall in order for that to happen, right? And then by domino effect, all the other Western countries will just fall along with it, and that seems like the most logical solution. So I don't know. You
see, the reason I'm finding this intriguing is that I didn't want to make. There's just so many YouTube videos out there now. People can't watch them all, and they can't watch all of them all. If you see what I mean, I wanted to get that thing out about saying to people, please don't vote. Something I did want to say to you three in particular is that, I did put it in my movie that this whole thing could end with your elite, with your ruling class, using a nuclear weapon against their own people. There was a time, maybe even as little as 20 years ago, when people would have instantly dismissed that and said, oh, come on, things could never get that bad. But look how bad they are now. Everybody is walking around in a face mask. There's all these things. You can't go to a football game, baseball game, can't go to a restaurant, all the pubs are closing. People are seeing with their own eyes the meltdown of Western civilization and the meltdown of America. And the reason that we're seeing this is because of what's going on with Prince Andrew in particular. Finally, one of the absolute top dogs has been caught with his pants down. He's made an absolute ass of himself with that interview where he just looks like a complete fool. And because of that, they've got round their Bilderberg table or something like that. And the establishment have said to themselves, look, we've got to do something here. We've got to put society right around the world into suspended animation because they're getting too close to seeing what we really are and coming to take us over. Now, recently, I was out having a very pleasant evening, walking along the river that's near to my house. I was mentioning this to Ed just before the broadcast. And I met this very nice young lady from Liverpool. And she was asking me to try and explain this to her. And I said to her, and your audience, your viewers might want to do the same thing, that if you look at the movie 13 Days, the Kevin Costner movie, that's a very good insight when they start to discuss what to do about the Cuban Missile Crisis, when they first discover that the Cubans have brought ICBMs into Cuba. The thing is that Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, he had to start negotiating with Robert Kennedy in particular, and obviously his brother, the president. What the hell are we going to do about this? And it's at that stage that you learn just what the ruling class are like about always being prepared. This is why they always say you don't ever get caught with your pants down. It's the saying amongst the ruling class. You just don't do it. That's why I'm not saying they've abandoned, but that's why Prince Andrew is in the situation that he's in now, because he's been caught with his pants down. And as I say in the movie, Robert Kennedy is saying, "Look, we're in real trouble here. If those missiles get fired, we've got 5 minutes. What are we going to do?" And of course, the generals like Curtis LeMay, they just want to bomb the shit out of them. That's the best way. Come on, Mr. President, you've got to be a man, da-da-da. And Kennedy doesn't want to do that because he's going to escalate the situation. So he wants another alternative. And that's when Robert McNamara starts to explain how they gamed out scenarios long before this crisis ever happened. Because that's what they do at the top of the military. They say to themselves, supposing this happens, how do we counter it? Supposing then that happens afterwards, how do we counter that? Supposing we have that unexpected thing happen, do we do that or that? See, this is what the military do. And that's what the rich are. They are a military class, you see. So, like I said, Robert McNamara, in the end, he had advised the blockade of Cuba. The point is that they are always ready with something. They're always ready with a contingency. And what they've done, when Prince Andrew had that horror show with the BBC's Emily Maitlis, they've said to themselves, look, we've got to put the whole of society into suspended animation. And that's what this pandemic is really all about. It's a man-created pandemic. And it's to keep all of us held in one place while they think about what the hell they're going to do next. And this will not end until this whole Prince Andrew thing is no longer in the news, until this child abuse thing and the sex trafficking thing goes out altogether. We won't, hear the end of this. This whole thing with Ghislaine Maxwell, there's something, if you don't mind, I'd like to explain about that, if you don't mind me going into that.
Yeah, of course not.
Is that okay?
Yep, let's do it.
Let's do it.
The thing is that the Americans, your people, will have started hearing about Robert Maxwell, her father. And because he was here and not there, I think it's probably going to be pretty sketchy as to who this man was and what he was, what he did, etc. So there's just something, a bit of detail here, which I'd like to fill in. This man was apparently born, and I've been trying to remember this name all week. I can't do it. Okay, I've had to write it down because his name apparently at birth was Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hoek. Now, you couldn't remember that. I mean, come on. And the story was that he was born in the Ukraine, just about on where the border is now, joined the Czechoslovakian army with the outbreak of World War II, fought for the Czechoslovakian army in exile, and apparently was this brave and amazing soldier who was part of the Allied effort in World War II. And because of that, he went up in the rankings. And because of that, because he ended the war as a hero, he was able to get into business very easy and become a media mogul. Now, I think that's a pile of tripe. I don't believe a word of that. This is, I think, another rich man's trick. Now, people might say, well, why don't you believe it? Well, I will explain why. Because if you are from the Ukraine, or if you come from Russia, or anywhere in Eastern Europe, then you always, if you speak like this for the first 20 years of your life, you cannot get rid of this dialect. They can't do it. They cannot do it. You mean anybody from Russia or Romania, Poland, anywhere. That's the way they speak. They can't get rid of that hard edge and this guttural thing. It's so much in their voice. You know, Robert Maxwell, on the other hand, I'll try and do my Robert Maxwell impression. If you can imagine a man growing up on an English stage and speaking Shakespeare from the age of 2, that was how he really spoke. He really did. He sounded like he'd had elocution lessons in English as an Englishman from the day he was born. This huge, fat man with these big black eyebrows and his big black hair. He apparently used to dye his hair all the time. And to me, it's just so obvious that he's been born into an intelligence agency surrounding from day one. The question is, which intelligence agency? Because apparently he had intelligence contacts with the KGB, the CIA, MI5, and the Mossad. Now, if you're thinking that's pretty incredible, and I'm sure that your audience will be, and thinking, well, how could anybody do that? Something that they need to know is that Alan Dulles, the man who I talk about in my film, who I think was very much involved in the Kennedy plot, he himself was known as Cicero because he, or Five Fingers, as he was known, he was very much the same kind of character. So I think that Robert Maxwell has been from the very beginning something created by the intelligence community, mainly the Israeli intelligence community. A lot of people are quite rightly saying that Ghislaine Maxwell is her father's daughter, you know. It's very obvious that she's every bit a crook. And the reason that they say that is that, oh, damn, we've lost it. No, it's frozen up again. Robert Maxwell, as I say, I think he was well, it's absolutely obvious that he was an intelligence agent. And I think Americans are now aware that of his story, being that he wound up getting deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. His businesses were failing. He owned all of these newspapers, and basically they just weren't selling. And his story allegedly ended when he fell off his yacht when he was in the Canary Islands, I think, which was called the Ghislaine, by the way, the Lady Ghislaine.
Wow.
And he was buried in Israel. And a lot of people made a lot of the fact that there were 6 different heads of the Mossad who came to his funeral, you see. So there was this big mystery left. I myself have never believed for 1 second that death was real. I don't believe that for a second. I think the funeral was faked and that he was just conveniently made to disappear because he was a bankrupt who owed, billions and whatnot. The most important thing to come out of that, or I should say that, if anybody was to say, what was it all about? What was his life all about? And what was the most specific end result of what he did? The most specific end result of what he did was that the pension funds of the people who worked for him in the newspaper industry were stolen. And in those days, the £500 million that he stole, that was a lot of money back in the 80s. That was serious wealth. So basically, I think that what he pulled off with this fake suicide or this fake death, or whatever you want to call it, was just the most gargantuan scam. And I hope that Americans will look at this and look back at the past and study the Reagan-Bush savings and loan scandal. Because I think they're very similar. I think that that's what's happened in both cases. I think these people pride themselves on being robber barons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They look at life and say, well, okay, somebody's made a movie over here, like Spielberg has made $4 billion from E.T. or something like that. And unless you're one of them, and Spielberg obviously is, then they're going to steal the money. That's what they're all about. They're robber barons. That's their ancestors were robber barons, and I think that that's what Robert Maxwell's life really has all been about. That I lost you for a second there, but you're back again now. It's okay.
Okay.
That's what his life has really all been about. So this is the background that Ghislaine Maxwell comes from. This is her inheritance, as it were.
Sure.
And it's all too neat that people have learned that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were working for the Mossad and for the intelligence community of your country and mine as well. And this, you see, is what is getting to me about this whole thing with Ghislaine Maxwell and the trial and the depositions and one thing and another. It's because, as you said about the sexual blackmail earlier, Ed, that's really what it's all been about. And this is what I fear will be either glossed over, or they just won't allow people to talk about it during the trial. In my film, there's that moment from those Senate hearings where they're talking, about Operation Mockingbird. As soon as it gets to the moment where the chairman is saying, has the Central Intelligence Agency ever been actively involved with television networks? And he immediately says, no, Mr. Chairman, we really have to get into executive session with this. We can't have the public hearing this. And this is what I fear is going to happen with this whole thing with Ghislaine Maxwell. Having said that, and I'm sorry I'm not finished, but I think it's important for people to hear this.
Great. You're great.
I don't believe Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't believe that. I don't think
so either.
Well, thank you, man, because I think that this is something they've created to regain control of the narrative. First of all, where was she found? In a place called Tucked Away. I mean, Ed, you've got a beautiful smile too. I mean, come on.
Yeah, totally ridiculous.
Are we grown-ups? How many grown-ups are out there who are watching this? Does anybody really believe that? I mean, if that's not a script that's being written by an intelligence agent, then I don't know what would be. And there have been many people, I'm not the only man at all who's been saying this. There have been many people who've looked at this and they've said, now just hang on a minute, something smells fishy here. Because if you think back to, good examples, I mean, Mike Tyson's arrest, if you think back to Winona Ryder, if you think back to O.J. Simpson, I mean, my God, the O.J. Simpson, that was the classic example. There's usually some film of the big arrest. The FBI have got them, and here's the handcuffs. And they're pushing the head down into the nice FBI car, and you're going off to prison. Well, there's none of that. Even if it's filmed through, the bars of a gate or something, they usually have got a celebrity arrest,
Sure.
on camera. None of that at all. And as many people pointed out, that there's no mugshot
Yeah.
of
Yep.
Epstein at all. So the kind of people who were looking, who were thinking these thoughts, they wondered, is it possible to check out if somebody in your country is incarcerated, and if so, how? And there's a website, I've used it myself. It's called something like lockedup.com or something. It didn't take me long to find it.
Sure.
Anybody who's curious about this, on your side of the water, if you just put in, how can I find out that if my relative is locked up in America, you soon find the site. It's not hard. And when researchers first tried this, and they put Ghislaine Maxwell's name into, MDC, nothing came up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, they've closed that loophole since. I've tried it myself, and her prison number comes up now. Yeah, because I'm researching it.
Sure.
Now it comes up. But as I say, all of these things, well, when the arraignment was going to happen, I wrote to Alison J. Nathan, the judge, and said, listen, come on. This is the biggest thing ever. I mean, everybody's talking about this.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any TV cameras, et cetera, et cetera? And it came out that there was supposed to be a live feed that was going to happen. You could see in real time, cameras in the courtroom, and she was going to be dragged in and arraigned. And it just didn't happen. We got this colored drawing instead. But the thing that has convinced me most has been Sean Atwood.
Okay.
I do not trust Sean Atwood.
Okay, I've heard some people questioning him too. I've heard some people some sort of skepticism. Although he has been doing the most, coverage into the Epstein. He's been doing a lot of coverage into the Epstein Maxwell thing.
He has. But it's very easy to go on and on calling Prince Andrew a cockroach. But the thing that that got me was that he had this lady on who brought this up. And when she brought it up, the fact that people had researched her prison number and hadn't found it.
Was this Maria Farmer, or was one of the victims, or another researcher?
No, it was an English lady. I can't remember her name. I hope she'll forgive me because she's quite well known. But like I say, when she put this to Sean Atwood,
yes,
the length of time that he spent on smoothing this over, I found very suspicious, because what he was saying, and I'll say it in like a few seconds, was that basically this is happening during COVID, and because it's COVID, it's chaos in the jails, and because it's chaos in the prisons and one thing and another, and everybody's got to wear a mask, etc. That's why this hasn't been as well coordinated with Ghislaine Maxwell as it should have been. Well, that's bollocks. That is pure bollocks. She is the most, or should be the most famous prisoner in the world, maybe of all time. I mean, come on. Everybody wants to know about this case. And yet we have still not seen one single fragment of solid evidence that she's incarcerated.
Yeah.
And I don't believe it. I think they've done this to try and regain control of the narrative. What do you think?
Well, I think Whitney Webb's looked into this a lot, and right from the start, just the charges brought against her were bogus right off the bat. I mean, they picked just this little period of time that they were going to say she was guilty for, and they weren't actually child trafficking charges, weren't they? They were
endangerment, was it?
What were the charges they used? I mean, just right off the bat, it just looks suspicious. I completely agree,
And they used it. It was like between 1994 to 1997 or something like that to verify that it wasn't during a period of time that would implicate anybody of any serious stature, like Prince Andrew, right? So it was supposedly before the time frame in which they allegedly had interactions with Prince Andrew, so that he wouldn't be pulled into the investigation. You know what I mean? So that the charges are very specific to a very short period of time. Yeah. I think it's also very interesting to point out too, like you mentioned in your film, like it's the naivety of people to think that there's ever going to be anything that will come out of any of these official investigations, because the people doing the investigations are complicit in all of this stuff.
Exactly.
So that's not
beautifully Beautifully said.
This is about brushing it under the rug.
Yeah.
This is about controlling the narrative, just like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's frightening, it's frightening. It makes you feel so helpless. Like when you see things like, just Jeffrey Epstein just being killed, just straight up, in a maximum security facility. Like it just makes the helplessness that you feel just like, wow, another thing, like you said in your film too, everything's a rich man's trick. And I love how you just listed all the different ones. The criminal justice system, there's one law for the rich and one law for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, look at the thing with Prince Andrew. I mean, how can I have been writing to our Home Secretary, Priti Patel. That's Priti, in case anybody's wondering. But it's not called Priti. Priti, it's an Indian name. I've been writing to her several times to say, listen, we've got this mutual legal agreement. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's been a big story here. There's this mutual legal agreement between Britain and the United States to basically just help each other in difficult cases. And the Americans, the American Law Office, had asked specifically, this prince, you won't cooperate. Will you help us with this? Because it was perfectly possible to have our Home Office, our justice system, say to Prince Andrew, well, you've got to come to be in front of a magistrate in Westminster. And I actually, funnily enough, would have preferred that. A lot of people have said he should be extradited to America. But I actually think it would have been better if he hadn't have been, because if he was in front of a magistrate in Westminster, he wouldn't be able to take the Fifth Amendment. He could in your country, you see. So if he was in front of a Westminster magistrate giving evidence, he really would be in so much trouble, because one lie and he's guilty of perjury.
Yeah.
And then that, the shit really has hit the fan, as they say in your country. So, and yet, still, I mean, Priti Patel knew everybody was asking this question. Yeah. And her response was, we prefer not to get involved in this kind of thing. If we can help. Oh, well, is that convenient or what?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wanted, as a matter of record as well, with the three of you, I've also written to the head of the opposition here in Britain, whose name now is Keir Starmer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that he did say on this quite well-known thing we have here called LBC Radio, Leading Britain's Conversation is what it's called.
Mm.
Keir Starmer, when he was interviewed, he did say, well, Prince Andrew, yes, he should be cooperating with the law. Well, he isn't.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Starmer, what are you doing about it? I've written to you about this. Have you put pressure on the Conservative Home Secretary to make something happen? No, he hasn't. Now, people may wonder why. Well, I'll tell you why. During the time that Jimmy Savile was committing his crimes, many people, many times, tried to bring his crimes to light and tried to get him prosecuted. And every single time, what we call the Crown Prosecution Service here, the CPS, refused to look into it.
Yep.
Guess who was the head of the CPS during this time? Keir Starmer.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely on my list of things that I wanted to bring up with you, is the whole Jimmy Savile thing. I know that a lot of people listening probably are really familiar with it, but I bet you there's a large portion of the audience that maybe's never even heard the name before. And I know that it's kind of back to square one, but I would love to hear kind of your being over there. I think that just being in England, like, you probably have a much different maybe take on it than we do, and I'd love to hear kind of like how long have you known about Jimmy Savile before it came up, or was it I'm just maybe shed some light on this.
Well, Scott, the thing I'd best say at the very start is that what I want people to realize about the whole Jimmy Savile situation is that the establishment is Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me get that sentence blandly out in one nice little thing, you see. Because In the days when you were, I mean, we're going right back to the beginning of the 60s. I can't, what was the name of that show? It's gone. But there were.
Top of the Pops?
Well, the thing is that America had its own thing.
Okay.
It had its own shows, it had its own stars, it had its own presenters. And like I say, it's going all the way back to the beginning of Top of the Pops. Jimmy Savile was there from the very beginning. So he was a face on British TV. I'm trying to think of who an equivalent would be, really.
Like Dick Clark, Ryan Seacrest, that sort of thing.
Well, the thing is, if you can think of somebody from the 60s whose face was always associated with pop music, that was what Jimmy Savile was.
Yeah.
And he was known to the public as an eccentric and ebullient figure in those days. And for, I would say, the first 10 years, or even more, of his broadcasting career, all he did, Scott, was Top of the Pops. That was it. That's the only way we saw him. And nobody had a clue what he was up to in those days. And then he was given his own show, which was called Jim'll Fix It.
Yep.
And this is what I mean about the establishment being Jimmy Savile, because the way he was presented to the public was as an avuncular figure. What he was doing was he was inviting children to write into him and say, what's your dream? What would you like to do? Would you like to play football with Liverpool Football Club, those stars? Would you like to sing with your favorite pop group? A lot of children wanted to do that. He was apparently trying to make all these children's dreams come true. And because of that, the establishment was presenting him as something not very far away from being a saint. And this was a man who was having sex with the dead, who was having sex with people who were close to death in hospitals, women who were dying, children who were dying. He was doing it with them. He was into necrophilia. He was into all of these things. And at the same time, he was abusing little girl after little girl after little girl after little girl and sharing them around with the rich. And the thing is, this is the most important thing to realize with this, is that the establishment want you to know about Jeffrey Epstein. They want you to know about Jimmy Savile if things blow up, you see, because that's why they find them in the first place. What you have to do is say, why Jimmy Savile? Why him? Out of all of the men in Britain at that time, why would he get that prime job of hosting Top of the Pops? Why him? He got that job because he could not. He was like Joe McCarthy, your senator who had the Reds under the bed scandal. They seek out men who have got a problem. They can't keep their hands off women. They can't keep their hands off girls. Quite often, they can't stay away from the bottle, can't stay away from drugs, combination of all of them. But this is what they look for, is these kinds of characters, because they're being set up from the beginning as a fall guy. Yeah. If it comes out what's going on, what the establishment do then with their corrupt mainstream media is to say, oh my God, there's all these little girls have been abused, and there's all these women coming forward now 10 years later saying, oh, I was raped, I was abused, I was this, I was this. And they say, and it was him. It was Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. It was Jimmy Savile. It was, and not Prince Philip, not Prince Andrew. They get away with it. That's the whole point. And this is the main thing, Scott, and thank you for the question, that I want people to understand, is that this is really what it's all about. The people at the top are exactly like the mafia don who hires a killer bambini. He gets a 14-year-old to shoot his business rival. It's exactly the same thing. They make sure with their money that somebody else takes the blame, that somebody else goes to jail. And this is why, with this whole Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell thing, that I fear that if, let's say I'm wrong, because I'd love to be proved wrong. I would love to be proved wrong. There's nothing I'd like better than to see Ghislaine Maxwell being dragged into court looking just like Jeffrey Dahmer, with a suit on and the handcuffs and one thing and another. And 30, 50, 100 odd women saying that woman abused me along with Jeffrey Epstein when I was a child. There's nothing I would like more than that. I just don't think that it's going to happen. But as I say, if it ever did, my big problem is that I think you could almost imagine a scenario in a courtroom where you would have the trial going on, and it would look just like those Senate hearings into Operation Mockingbird, whereby the moment anything came up that could implicate the Queen of England or Donald Trump or Bill Clinton or Alan Dershowitz or any of these high-profile figures, the moment anything looked like it was going to lead over there, okay, there's going to be a government advisor saying, "Oh, no, Your Honor, can't talk about this. Yeah. This is a national security issue." How in the hell can it be a national? How in the hell is the type of strap-on dildo favored by Ghislaine Maxwell supposed to be an issue of national security? How in the hell is it an issue of national security that Ghislaine Maxwell has got a laundry basket full of sex toys?
Yeah. It's like a couple of things come to mind when you mention that particular aspect of it. It's just like these Senate hearings regarding like the big tech and the censorship issues that we're seeing right now. So you see, them sitting down, being grilled by U.S. senators, right? We have like Sundar Pichai, the Google head of Google, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, sitting down and being grilled about their business practices, which are so just evil, not only unconstitutional, unethical, and all that stuff, and evil, but it's literally just a dog and pony show because whether you're Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey, you're just looking back at these senators like, fool, I own you. What are you doing? You know what I mean? Like there's just nothing but disdain and just they're just like whatever, and they just straight lie. Like Zuckerberg, like he said, they asked him about censoring a particular that article about Biden's laptop, and he says, "Oh no, we didn't censor it. We just flagged it and made it so that it wouldn't spread as much,
wouldn't spread widely.
It wouldn't spread widely. And it's like, okay, in other words, you censored it, right? But anyway, so this whole thing is just a farce, right? I feel like that's one of the biggest failures that we're seeing right now is the fact that we're just allowing these tech companies to just control the narrative and to absolutely it's just so bad. It's bad.
It's the media. They're just the new form of media, and they're doing the same thing the media's always done.
Yeah.
Control the narrative to lie to us.
Which is another rich man's trick right there.
Yeah.
Yep. How is I know that like Channel 4, BBC, these are your guys' big media outlets. Like, what are you seeing over there in terms of how are they spinning what we're seeing in the world? Like, is it just as blatant as what we're seeing over here with our CNNs and MSNBCs and Foxes and
I've been wrestling with this myself. There's a very important question in modern media life now as to whether they are wicked or stupid.
Yes.
Whether they're part of it or whether they're just dumb. It's a very good question. I'm sure a lot of your audience will have pondered this for themselves, and I can see that you have. People are always thinking of this.
Picture.
I think one thing I might mention is a broadcaster called Philip Tibbenham, who used to be on BBC Two. Interestingly, he disappeared just after the 9/11 thing, but he was the anchor on what we call BBC Two Newsnight on the night that it happened. And like I say, not too long after, suddenly his broadcasting career was over and he disappeared. And there was a man who would have been a lot like yourselves who was curious as to what role the mainstream media played. Were they part of it? Or were they just stupid and reading things off an order queue? And he found Philip Tibenham in his local pub or something, and he filmed him pretty well on this handheld camera. And he was asking Philip Tibenham about that night and, what did happen and what did you think was going on? What did you imagine was going on? This planes in the building thing story that and the impression that I got from Philip Tibenham was that he was just what we call thick. Over in your country, it's dumb, or whatever. But he didn't seem to me, honestly, to have any brains at all. And I think that, you see, once it was becoming obvious that the rich elite had pretty much bought the whole of mainstream television and film around the world. The good people here in Britain started to leave. They could see the way that things were going. The handwriting was on the wall. I met several who'd been very, very high level, important independent producers who were making films for BBC, ITV, Channel 4, etc. And had conversations with a lot of them. And they were all saying, we've just never seen anything like this before. We keep asking for commissions to look into really important topics, really important issues, things which 10 years ago would have been covered. And then they're not doing it anymore. We don't like the way that this is going. So I think what is true about mainstream media here right now is that it's populated pretty much by deadwood. The only people who have stayed are people who are very old, getting, late 50s, early 60s even, who've been in broadcasting all their life. And not that they've ever had any talent, but they can't do anything else. And they're basically just coming to the end of their careers. And the only young people who they're bringing into broadcasting are young people who are pretty much witless. So you've got this rather odd combination in particularly British television now.
Yeah.
There's no talent. The BBC these days never, ever produces a new idea. They've got no ideas. They don't even take a new approach. This is the TV service which in the 1970s, and I discussed this with Jason Goodman, and I was very proud almost to hear him saying, well, yeah, in the 60s, 70s, right up into the 80s, it was acknowledged by just about everybody that, the British filmmakers, British TV producers were by far and away the greatest in the world. And if you wanted a good film making for TV or for anywhere else, good documentary, you had to go and seek out a Brit in order to to ensure that quality standard. That's all gone now. This whole thing, this whole era has taken that away, and we're left pretty much with, I've got to say, witless morons, because the standards have just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. And but if the question was how many of them actually know that they've become just a cog in a propaganda machine.
Yeah, totally.
How many of them are aware that everything they do is fake news?
Yeah.
I would say maybe as much as, I think 60 or 70% of them are so dumb, they really don't understand what's going on.
Well, I mean, yeah, when you get like the Cuomo's, Chris Cuomo's, yeah, just totally dumb. He doesn't know what he's about. No, I'm just kidding. No, they're deeply entrenched. But like here in America, though, I think it's a lot more deliberate. I think, you have a lot of these folks that are literally brought up into it, like the Rachel Maddows. She's a Rhodes Scholar. That whole thing, the very nefarious ties there. And then we have like what's his face? Anderson Cooper, right? Anderson Cooper, who actually went to the Dalton School, where Jeffrey Epstein used to teach. So
Did he go there?
He went to the Dalton School, and then he
I find that amusing.
Yep, interned at the CIA. And so like and Vanderbilt heir, or the Vanderbilt family, you know what I mean? Like it's just like I think, you know, in that case, he's just brought up into it, right?
Totally.
He's been MK Ultra'd into that position since he was a little kid, I would say. You know, so I think the American media is so deliberate.
But then we have the other side of it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, they look at like what's going on with coronavirus and all this nonsense, and it's I mean, 60% of our cable TV media is the advertisements are big pharma.
Mm-hmm.
So you know they're going along with the narrative. They've, not to mention, I mean, the education system's taught them this way right from the get go. So they're just following orders. You know, you cannot go against the narrative that's being given right now without losing your credentials, or you know, you're going to be taking off the air. And I mean, doctors are going to lose their credentials. I mean, it's a system that's set up. You have to kind of follow the narrative, you know? So, I mean, people are doing what they have to do to keep their jobs, really, you know?
Yeah. That's the sadness of it. It is that, you know, yes, you can understand, especially somebody nearing retirement, why they would just want to plod along and keep their salary. But it is those kinds of people who the oligarchs depend upon the most.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and it is just, well, maybe it's an impossible situation, but you know, I mean, getting through to these people, I don't know if it is possible.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's definitely not in their best interest. Like it's all just they've got them wrapped up, man.
Damn, it's frozen up again.
Man, so I mean, I have a list of stuff from the movie that I would love to talk about.
Go ahead.
Right? Yes.
Go ahead.
You know, I think one of the things that stands out the most, and we've kind of dived into this a little bit in previous episodes, is just the American Nazi connections, right? We did a whole episode exploring, you know, eugenics and how like the American eugenics movement was basically the inspiration for Germany's early sterilization programs under like Ernst Rudin and all that.
Thank you for bringing that up, because an awful lot of people, and I don't just mean Americans.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that generally speaking, the world does not know that eugenics began with rich Americans and not with the Nazis.
100%.
Right.
For sure.
Very important point.
Yeah.
I just wanted people to know that, because everybody should be, you see, studied in school.
Yeah.
100%.
And it isn't.
Yeah, I didn't learn about it until just this last year, pretty much. And it's so insane. And then your movie in particular, it just makes all these connections. And in our research too, like all the same names, all the same characters, Prescott Bush, the Harriman brothers, you know, like these are all the same names that are popping up, like whether you're talking eugenics. In fact, the Harriman brothers are the ones that financed to have Ernst Rudin come over, where he was voted unanimously as the president of the International Eugenics Conference. I can't remember the exact name of the committee, but you know, they were all involved in funding it, you know, from the very get-go. And now you see that it's the same characters that are involved in like the Kennedy assassination. It's just like so in the enmeshment between these characters between Nazi Germany and the United States during that time are just so incredibly shocking, you know.
Good for you, Scott. Good for you. You've done your homework, my friend. You see, this, Scott, is the kind of thing that I was researching myself. More than 30 years ago. And it was this kind of train of thought that you know, really led to my movie. You know, it was finding out things like that about eugenics and finding out the mentality of the American oligarch. I was just having a conversation when I was emailing Chris Milligan back and forward yesterday. We've got an announcement to say to the world in a minute.
Good, awesome.
But there was something that he was pulling me up on about Simeon Eben Baldwin, who was in the list of the Skull and Bones members. Yeah, I think you probably remember that bit from the film.
Yep.
And it meant that I had to look up his Wikipedia page, which, funnily enough, I hadn't done before. I'd researched Baldwin on some other site, So I had to pull up his Wikipedia page. And it was very refreshing to discover that this is a man who was Chief Justice in Connecticut in 1910. And in 1910, he was still absolutely in favor of whipping and castration for criminals.
Okay, yeah.
Nice man.
Yeah.
There's the skull and bones for you.
Oh man.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Skull and bones, man. Like the brothers under skin, right? You know, they have allegiance to themselves above all else, right? And then it's just so again, everything's a rich man's trick, like the 2000 election where you have two fellow bonesmen running against each other,
Exactly.
John Kerry and George W. Bush. It's like, okay. Yeah. See, that was way before I woke up, right? You know, I remember, gosh, I didn't like after 9/11, like we talk about this a lot on the show, you know, 9/11 was a huge part, like way down the line of us waking up. But at first, man, I was so duped. I was like, you know, yeah, I was a younger man back then, but like still I was like, yes, we need to go get these terrorists. They hate our freedom. You know, it's just like, oh my God, looking back, I'm so embarrassed. But yeah. So, but now, you know, that was basically the catalyst for me personally waking up quite a bit. I think a lot of people too. Couple of other things too. You know, I think I had a question for you. So I'm a big, you know, Megan too. When I first met Megan, she was like, so I've been reading this book by a guy named Bill Cooper, and I was like, whoa. This is the coolest chick I've ever met in my life.
That's how we became really good friends, actually.
That's nice.
So Bill Cooper, William Cooper, right? He is known for a lot of, you know, I've seen one of his lecture series where he has a different view about the Kennedy assassination, where his assertion was that, you know, it was the driver that turns around, and you can see in the video where he turns around and pulls the gun and goes like that. And so I've seen his lecture with the footage of that, and then the other assertion being that what appears to be the gun is just the reflection off of the passenger's head.
That's just classic disinformation.
Yeah, and so that's the thing too. Is I love your theory the way you propose it in the movie. It's just it makes perfect sense, and it's something that I'd never really come across before. The idea of there being so many different shooters on the tower, let alone and then the kill shot having come from the sewer, you know, and there's so many indications of that with the cop propping his motorcycle, like looking down in there, like and it seems to make so much sense. Like that makes a lot of sense. I was just wondering, like, do you have any views on Bill Cooper? I know that later in his life he did backpedal on a lot of things, like particularly about aliens and stuff like that.
There have been so many people who've tried to discredit what I've said, and there were so many people before my film came along, who were, you know, government-sponsored agents. That, oh, geez, when I was nearing the point of starting to write, one of the websites that I looked at, which purported to be something that was trying to help the public understand what went on, and really it was once again totally the opposite. It's another smoke and mirrors website, and this one in particular I remember because it said, when you're looking at the Kennedy assassination and who did it and who was responsible, and it gave a list, and it said, these are all the possible culprits. And you could have Oswald, you could have Oswald and Tibbet, you could have then another man, or you could have the Cubans, or you could have the Russians, or you could have and the list just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And there was this man who you've probably heard of, Josiah Thompson, who was a private detective. He was hired by the media, and it's interesting because this was a very bright man, and he did a great job. And he said that he had investigated in your country many, many murders. He'd had so many investigations of murders in your country. And he said that when you're an investigator, and he said you can ask any police detective about this. I think Ed knows exactly what I'm going to say here, that when you're really, truly a police detective looking into this kind of thing, what you always find with murders is the same thing. He said, if you go into it, it's okay. It's possible. She did it. Maybe he did it. Maybe it was the butler. Maybe it was the limo driver. Maybe it was that Puerto Rican who they saw running away. So the investigation starts. And what always happens is that you find a piece of evidence, that one gets eliminated. You find another piece of evidence, that one gets eliminated. Bless you, Megan.
Thank you.
And little by little, this happens.
Yeah.
It gets smaller until the day that you find out that his wife did it or his brother did it. What Josiah Thompson said, and he was so articulate in this, he said that if you look at the Kennedy assassination, he said things haven't gotten simpler. And not only that, they haven't gotten simpler over the years. Over time, it's become more and more of a riddle, more and more complex, more and more difficult to understand. And when I heard that, I was so grateful I saw that interview, because quite clearly this was something someone was creating. Yeah. It had to be created. They were making it. There's a line, which I'm sure you remember, in Oliver Stone's film. And this was why it was written. I think it's said by Joe Pesci, where he says it's a riddle wrapped inside an enigma, wrapped inside a puzzle. Yeah, of course it is, because that's what the Central Intelligence Agency wants. And when I first started this, because I was up against exactly the same problem as everybody else. Was it that one? Was it him? Was it her? Et cetera, et cetera. There's all this confusion. There's all this cloud, this mist that you're trying to look through to sort out fact from fiction. And I thought to myself, I know what this is about. What they want is for you to start investigating this. And as soon as you go there, he gives you 10 different versions of the same story. You ask her, you get 15 different versions of the same story. And then they contradict each other. And then somebody else contradicts them. And you get into this riddle. And most people at that stage think, oh, what the hell? How can anybody ever? This is impossible, and they give up. That's what they want.
Yeah. It's the same.
The moment you accept it, they win.
Yeah.
And that's what I wasn't prepared to do. And for a very long period, I said to myself, I'm going to be the first man to get through all of this. Somehow, I'm going to get this truth sorted out. And that's why it was such a moment of epiphany, talking about that drain thing. When, I came across that wonderful man, Robert D. Morningstar, who showed me the comparison between. I knew there was something there, but it was one of those things that was at the back of my head. I knew there was something there with Tibbet and Kennedy. I just couldn't figure out what it was.
The body switch, right?
Sorry, what?
Is that the body switch? Is that what you mean?
The thing was that once I had got, because I knew there was something wrong with the Tippett funeral, and people have asked me to prove this. And that piece of film, I can't find it anywhere now. It was a piece of archive film, which was shot, I think, by ABC. But I remember the Tippett funeral from very, very long ago. Even maybe before I was a young man, maybe even as a teenager. But I remember specifically them saying there was something very strange about this whole affair. Why wouldn't they let his wife have one last look at him by opening the coffin? Why wouldn't they do that? And I remember the words like yesterday, that he was buried with unseemly haste. Why do you ever bury? Why have you ever known a funeral?
Yeah,
with unseemly haste.
It's the old trick where you throw Osama bin Laden over the bow or the bow of the ship, right, before anybody finds out any different, right? Same old trick, right? Yeah.
Well, like I said, that was what pushed me on to, and once I'd got that, the Kennedy and Tippett reality, that was what led to everything. Then the way that everything fell into place was, it still makes me emotional.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. You know, obviously we're going to encourage everybody to go back and watch your film for sure.
Just tell me about Dougie Scott. Just while I think about it, because I found something out the other day talking about watching my movie. There's this lovely man called Alexander Ravella. I'd like to give Alexander a little wave. Hello, Alexander.
Shout out to Alexander.
It's a lovely man. He's on Facebook. Oh, please tell everybody to write to him. He's a fantastic man. Because he uploaded my film, and it's been the best version, I would say, for people to look at, because the the public comments are the most genuine. When people are not interfered with on the public comments of a copy of my movie, what you get is people saying, "Oh wow, this should be seen in every history class in America."
Yeah,
this should be screened everywhere. The whole world should see this movie. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
On the original version, I explained this to Jason Goodman. What you had was people would say something like that, and then a shill would say below, "Oh no, it shouldn't be." You know, it's
100%. Yep.
You know, it was crazy. Well, Alexander, I don't know if he wants to upload it again or try to do something about this. But I've found the last few times that I've clicked on the version that he uploaded, that if you click on it, before the little bar gets across, it automatically corrects to the next video. And it won't let you watch it. And the reason I find that interesting is that I think it was just yesterday, somewhere, I read that people have been putting my name into Amazon. And if you put in mind, I've never even looked at the Amazon website. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know anything about it. They've said if you put my name into Amazon and click on it, it automatically self-corrects to something else. You can't even check me out for things I've written on Amazon.
Wow.
They're the games that they're playing, Ed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It doesn't surprise me. That's honestly in the world we're living in.
Exactly.
You know?
There's a couple more characters I wanted to kind of expound upon, and I think maybe our listeners would get a kick out of this. So who's Charles Harrelson?
Who is Charles Harrelson?
Yeah. Yeah. Over here in America, you know, we have Woody Harrelson, right? And everyone's familiar with him. But I was always, you know, when I first came across this, I was really surprised to hear about Charles Harrelson and his involvement.
Do you mean?
Yeah.
Woody Harrelson's father.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, he's in the movie. This is the man who was the shooter from the fence.
Yep.
And he was hired because he was friends with the chief mafia man in Dallas at the time, and he had shot to death Judge John Wood, who was known as Maximum John because he was really tough on criminals, and that's why the mafia wanted him out of the way. Yeah. And so the thing is that when you have oligarchs putting together a team to assassinate somebody, what they always want is some. I mean, it sounds stupid, doesn't it? It's just like every other job. You've got to have proved that you've done it before successfully. You see, that's the kind of people that they hire. They don't hire people who have been unsuccessful.
Yeah.
So and that's the reason why they hired, and he was the most important shooter, Malcolm Wallace. The reason that Malcolm Wallace was put up in the school book depository was in order to cover the contingency, which actually happened, of the first shot missing. Because the damn thing, my friends, is that if the gods had been on Kennedy's side that day, this might have happened. Because that first bullet could have killed the driver, or it could at least have hit him. If it had hit him, Kennedy might have reacted much more quickly to the first shot. And the thing was, they knew that this could happen, and they knew that he might get out of the car quick enough to avoid being hit. And that was why Malcolm Wallace was positioned almost directly up above him. So that it was most likely, you see, if he knew he was being shot at, that he would duck. If he ducked down in the car, Malcolm Wallace was the best shot, and he was the man who was supposed to get him.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next individual that I wanted to maybe talk about, I've heard other researchers talking about him recently, is Ted Gunderson, the FBI guy who seems to have exposed this all a long time ago. Finders Cult, all that stuff. It seems like he was the one that was originally, he's been talking about this for 20, 30 years ago. And now it's all just come basically vindicating what he was saying back then when they all thought he was crazy. In terms of the child trafficking and all this stuff. But you mentioned him in your movie, and I was hoping maybe you could tell our audience a little bit about Ted Gunderson.
Well, the most important thing about Ted Gunderson is what you've already said. It's funny, Scott, somebody, I was looking on the public comments today on one of the versions of my film in preparation for this. And it was said when he died that he just died. But somebody wrote that they said, I know Ted Gunderson's son. I'm friends with him. And it wasn't a natural death. He was murdered.
Of course.
And he wasn't young, and yet they still took care of him. But like I say, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's so obvious that what Ted Gunderson was trying to do, and I can make this one very short, was to report the very things that we are now hearing about with Jeffrey Epstein and the child trafficking. And as he said himself, somebody of his credibility, somebody who was head of the FBI in such a huge region. And I mean, somewhere he says, I've got a budget of like $100 million a year or something that I'm responsible for. And I've got all these agents underneath me. And he's saying, a man of my credibility. And I'm shouting this as loudly as I can. And the entire American mainstream media is ignoring me completely. This is why I said at the very start that Americans will be crazy if they vote in this election. You have to have a complete root and branch overhaul of your country. If a car, say, is in such a bad state that it's hardly running because it needs a service, changing the driver isn't going to help the car. For Christ's sake, if the filters are clogged up, if the spark plugs are clogged up, if the engine oil needs changing, then it needs doing. You can't, make a car better simply by changing the driver. You have to work on the car. And I do think to take that point a bit further, and it's very, very true of my country as well, very, very true of the whole Western world, I think, is that this digital age that's allowed people like us to do this really has changed life in the last 20 years so much that it's made most of what the past was look like an anachronism, particularly the royal family in Britain. It's just so obvious from Prince Andrew's behavior and from the way that people have reacted to his behavior that they are now absolutely useless, pointless, and we just shouldn't have them. And to the same degree, we shouldn't have the American ruling class. We shouldn't have the capitalist system that you're suffering under. Something I was wanting to bring up, and actually I wanted to direct this at Meghan, because I was watching a video of Meghan the other day, and this British woman was being asked on the street how much she thought Americans had to pay for health care. Because Americans have no idea of how you're perceived as this huge joke as a country when it comes to healthcare. Because in Europe, well, I think you know what we've got in Europe. And this woman, who I think it was in London or Birmingham or somewhere, they said to her, how much do you think it costs a woman to have a baby in America? Meghan, would you like to tell people the answer?
Well, I guess that depends on where you have your baby in America. All my babies were born at home.
Well, this was the point I wanted to make, you see. Well, I'm not surprised to hear it, because I want to use this broadcast to tell people the answer, because it shocked the hell out of me just as much as that woman, because what she was told was that basically it's like about $10,000.
Babies in the hospital, I think it's anywhere from about 15 to 30,000 hospital births. At least cesarean sections are around $35,000, and that's over 30% of all babies delivered in the United States are done so by cesarean section. So that's it's a huge cost. But just normal vaginal birth, at least within the last 5 years, last time I checked, I think the average is around $13,000 to go do what your body's made to do, but to go and pretend that you're sick and in an emergent situation and have doctors rushing around and interfering. We can tell that I'm not very fond of hospital births, but I did not give birth to any of my children in a hospital, and I paid like a few $1,000s, and that included, I think my first child, I paid $3,500, and that included all of my maternity care, all of my vitamins, any blood work that I had done. I had no intervention happening. Nobody took my baby out of my arms at birth. I wasn't having ultrasounds and all kinds of, internal physical exams and, all these different things that they would like to push. I had done my research ahead of time, and I was not going to have any of that happen to me or my children. So I speak out pretty heavily against it.
Is there? I'm wondering if there's any statistics about how many American women have their babies at home, just purely and simply to avoid the cost. Do you know how many American women give birth at home?
I don't know offhand. I will say that I know
it's a very small
percentage. It's very small. Like really in the last 20 years in particular, I know this has been a huge war against women having informed consent in terms of just what their bodies are made to do, what happens to our bodies during pregnancy, what happens during labor and delivery, and what is natural. And I feel that the propaganda that's come towards women
than 1%.
It's less than 1%.
It is do what?
To have home births, less than 1%. We're just looking it up now.
99% of American women are happy to pay between $10,000 and $30,000
and be traumatized, have their children be hurt, have their rights and their processes be interfered with, and traumatize these children. It's so disgusting. It really, really is disgusting. They will pay a lot of money, and the truth is because they're not informed. And what has happened here, I know in our state, but nationally, is a huge push, and from a legal standpoint, that women are not given the option to labor and birth at home. That is something that really, and we can see this playing out with so many things, but it's the fear topic, right? It's not safe. You're not capable. Maybe your hips aren't wide enough. Maybe your baby won't be born whole and healthy or won't be born breathing. And you need obstetricians there to be able to cut that baby out of you in the eventuality that 30% of the time that needs to happen. And it's absolute farce. But they really make it to be a scary thing. And it's like anything, women that question their doctors or even question like nurse midwives, by and large, they're sold a horrific picture of fear. And so, they're willing to just fork that money out under the guise of being a safer, cleaner, better process. And in fact, they're given exactly the opposite. So.
And the middle of the road was the midwife centers.
She was also told, and is this true, that if say Megan was to faint right now and she passed out, you didn't know what was wrong with her, and you called an ambulance, $2,000? Is that right?
Oh yeah, at least
it's
absolutely.
Way more than that. I think it's at least 5,000 for.
I think it's about 5,000 the average ambulance run. Is that what you're asking? And I can say too, like anytime that they have to come. I had a little boy who was interestingly medically intervened with, and he almost died in a hospital's care. And in order to rescue him from what was happening in that hospital and send him somewhere else, we had to take him by life flight in a helicopter, and that bill was about $35,000. So. Yeah, 3-hour helicopter ride. So I guess it was a 3-hour drive. So for him, it was about 45 minutes. But
So
anyway,
Megan, what's your reaction to the fact that a British woman in the same circumstances would pay nothing for the ambulance and nothing for the birth?
Yeah.
What's my reaction? I mean, to the labor and birth, I feel that it comes down to medical tyranny. I feel like that happens here. That's the norm. Medical tyranny, the prices that people pay. As to, I know that there's a few places. I think Switzerland, where their cost is not nothing but little, like $1,500, $2,000 last I checked. Again, like maybe within the last 5 years, I might be off on that number. But it's little. They have it's so small. Like some of these places, they just the thing is, because it's viewed as a normal part of the process of life, right? I mean, women are made to be able to grow babies in our bodies and to birth them and to have our children. It's not a medical emergency. So the fact that there's any cost, aside from someone who maybe would like to just pay like a midwife to come into their home, and you're paying for a service because you want additional support for whatever reason, but it shouldn't cost anything. There's no reason for it to cost anything.
Well, you see, the reason I'm raising this point is, again, to go back to what I said at the start about Americans, that you shouldn't vote. A lot of people will say, because I did discuss this with Justin Stellman when I was on his show. Justin Stellman said that if the whole of America just refused to turn up to vote, that they would just fake it anyway.
Yep.
They would.
Which is probably true. Probably they would.
100%. Yep.
Yes.
But believe me, if no Americans showed up to a polling booth in a couple of days' time, the people at the top will tremble as never before, because they'll say to themselves, "Oh my God,
they've woken up.
They can see through our game.
Yep.
Yeah.
They see through what we're doing to them. My God, what the hell are we going to? We haven't got them duped anymore. We haven't got them under our control anymore. Nothing would make a bigger impact on your country than to not vote at all. And then for all of you to write to whoever wins it, because it won't make a difference, and say, look, we've had enough of you. We've got to change all of this." Because the reason I raised this is that I grew up watching movies like Serpico.
Mm-hmm.
That to me was one of the greatest films I've ever seen. I mean, that's American cinema truly at its greatest. It really is wonderfully written, wonderfully acted, wonderfully directed. And I kept asking myself, why is it that America is so corrupt, and that there is this insatiable appetite for money, money, money? Why is the dollar always king? There's a scene in that movie where Serpico, who is brilliantly played, I have to say, by Al Pacino, turns up at Coney Island, and a plainclothes cop drives up, and immediately all the people who are surrounding Serpico disappear. And this plainclothes cop, who is one of the most sinister-looking men I've ever seen, they really chose the actor brilliantly, immediately frisks Serpico. And he says, you're not wired, are you? Don't want any wires. And then he starts to interrogate him. And he starts to explain, and he says, look, all this stuff that you've been doing and in the Bronx and one thing or another, $800 or say a month in the back pocket, that's chicken feed. And he says, look, it's only last week we sent out this friend of ours to hit the dope dealers. We waited until they'd got it all together, and then we hit them, and it was 40 grand split 5 ways. And that's serious money. And you don't mess around with that money, or it's the end of you. Now, and you're asking yourself, why is it that police officers are as corrupt as that, and that this kind of thing is happening? And I think that what you've just told me, Megan, to me, it makes sense. I think that in America, that Americans just don't realize that this insatiable appetite for this huge buffer of money, which you must feel protects you from any eventuality. If you have an accident, if you get laid off, if you have a baby, I think that in Europe, I would say, generally speaking, people go through life thinking, if only I could get ahead to somewhere around 50 grand or 100 grand, I'd feel comfortable. You see what I mean? The phone bill would never be an issue. Little Johnny's shoes, little Sarah's next dress, the children's school fees, maybe. None of these things, the next car, they wouldn't be an issue if I always had 50 to 100 grand-ish as a buffer in the bank. But I think Americans must feel like you must need maybe even $250,000 or $500,000 before you feel safe from anything that might happen. And I think that is why America has this the dollar is king mentality. One thing I love doing when I'm looking at American movies is recording how often you get what I call gangster values being sold by American movies.
Totally.
I would ask America, how many times in an American film have you heard somebody say, everybody uses everybody? How many times have you heard people say, shit happens, everybody lies, never apologize, it's a sign of weakness?
Yeah.
Got to give action to get action. And the one that's my favorite, good guys finish last.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
For sure.
You can never be a good guy because you'll get into money trouble. You'll get into financial difficulty. These are morals that gangsters are seeding into your heads every day. This is what you've got to rip apart.
Yes.
America will not be a decent country until the day that you have free healthcare. That's where you need to start. You've got to be like Europe in order to create a decent society.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's crazy. So talking about not voting, not participating in the system, what if we were to take the reins back and insert ourselves into the system, right? So for example, are you familiar with Brian Rose?
Oops.
I want to hear your take.
No. You didn't see that coming. You know what? I want to hear yours.
Okay. Well, okay. So here's my take on it, right? And of course,
hang on.
What's that?
Start with, let's go ladies first. Megan?
Okay.
Oh, okay. What question am I answering specifically?
Okay, so Brian Rose, he's our friend.
So I'm not very familiar with Brian Rose. So ask me more generally.
Okay, so basically he's the one, London Real.
Yeah.
He's done all the David Icke interviews.
I've seen some of that.
He's been heavily censored, and so he's emerged as like a advocate for freedom of speech, which is what we are all about. That's
I'm a big David Icke girl.
My number one thing is freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Censorship, and I think anybody who steps up to the plate to take on the power structures in the face of censorship is someone that I admire. And so now Brian Rose has announced that he's running for mayor of London, and so so I wanted to get your. What's that?
I've seen the advertisement. Yeah.
Okay. So, of course, he's an American, right? And so you have an American running for mayor of London. I'm sure that causes all kinds of chaos. But, the platform that he stands on, I 100% fundamentally support that, But I just I don't know. Maybe you have.
So essentially what we have is, we have someone that's along the ideals of
someone who's in our
basically
community.
He's a truther.
Yeah, he's in our community.
And he's running for local government.
Correct.
And what's my take on that?
Yeah.
In my ideal mind, there would be no government. that would be my ideal. I don't feel that human beings should be managed and controlled and told where they can and can't be.
Well said.
So that's, I know that everything that I tend to say on this platform is it tends to be like, right leaning, or I get called, I won't even go into what I get called, some pretty horrific things. And I always say,
people say that's right wing.
I get taken apart pretty. The things that I say, that I'm very right wing, very extremist, and yes.
Surely that is the most left wing position that anybody can have. I cannot fathom how people think.
But
don't call Megan left wing.
We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that in a moment, Megan. Sorry to interrupt, but I think Brian Rose is CIA.
Wow.
Damn.
Didn't see that coming.
Okay.
Wow.
And the reason why is that I have had several Facebook friends or people who wanted to be, in inverted commas, getting in touch with me and trying to get me to support him. Now, I've had a lot of, very disingenuous people. I mean, I've had lots of MI5 agents, particularly women, chatting me up, trying to get to know me, take me to dinner. Megan's laughing. Yes.
Oh, well, I would love to go to dinner, but we would be talking about things that are great. So
I think Megan might be. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I knew it all along.
Right from the moment I talked about Bill Cooper, you knew.
Yep. She got me good. Anyway, no, not to interrupt.
Sorry to interrupt you.
The thing is that I think Megan's smiling because she knows how women can spin a web.
Oh
yeah.
We can be pretty. I mean, I say we, not saying that I have done this, but I know the character of what I always would term to be low vibrational humans. And I am very familiar with the wiles of females because I am a female. And I know how our power could be used for evil if someone were to do so very well. And if you didn't have any sort of integrity or a conscience, or you were an empty vessel person, I can see, especially as a woman, how you could use that for utter evil madness and it be hugely wildly successful. That is just the power that women possess.
Well, it's a power that's been directed at me, Megan. And as I say, and not just women have tried to convince me that Brian Rose is on the level. I don't see any reason to believe he's on the level. To me, he comes across strongly, instantly, as someone who's obviously creepy. I find him really, really creepy.
I have to be honest and say I don't know that I've ever even seen his face. I'm not very familiar with. I'm pretty familiar with David Icke, and I've listened to quite a bit of David Icke, just in and of himself at rallies and different speeches. But I haven't listened, or even could tell you what Brian Rose looked like. To be fair, but I tend to pick that up with people too. When I always say they have something off in their eyes. You can generally tell someone being disconnected or not being a forward human or an upright human by something behind the pupil of the eye. And I don't really know how to explain that. I'm sure if I were to look at his face,
it's a sense.
But so that said,
you've got, Megan, and it's a good thing.
So here's a question. So the fact that like over the course of the last 6 months, Brian Rose and David Icke have gotten so close together, is David Icke CIA?
No. The thing is, simply because you're interviewed by somebody who is pretending to be on the side of the angels. I mean, anybody looking at Sean Atwood's podcasts for a period could be forgiven if they were new to this. For thinking that he's on the level. But as I say, he appeared just after Prince Andrew's meltdown, car crash interview. And I wondered about him from the very start because, as I say, this pandemic is purely and simply to cover for what the pedophiles are up to. And as soon as it kicked off, it was very interesting to me that Sean Atwood was selling it very heavily. All of the disingenuous figures about, I mean, he would come on his podcast and say, "Hello, everybody," and you got to understand, there's there's 40 million deaths in Italy, and there's 100 million deaths in Africa, and there's a da. And he really oversold it from the very beginning. And this is when I started to doubt him, you see. And so it doesn't mean that because you've been on the show. I mean, totally. A lot of people have been on that, Young Turks thing. I don't know if it's still around, that Senguga thing.
It is.
Who are nice people, but that is controlled disinformation,
I heard that too.
I personally think, and again, it's one of these things. I'd love to be proved wrong, and if I'm doing the man a disservice, then I'm doing him a disservice. I don't like the feeling that I get from Brian Rose.
Fair enough. What about? Okay, I gotta ask. While I got you here, what about Alex Jones?
Well, the thing is that with him, Scott, I have said, excuse me, in interviews that some people said or claimed to the conclusion that he was, working with the CIA, or he was a bad man all along. I'm glad I actually erased this, because I do want to talk about things that make sense. It does not make sense that he would stand on bridges with banners held up saying 9/11 was an inside job if he was disingenuous then. That does not make sense. Why would he do that? What would he have to gain? And what would anybody working with him have to gain? That does not make sense. I think that what happened to Alex Jones, and it's so American, was that he sold out. I just think it's as simple as that. The big thing that came along that, as far as I'm concerned, blew him out of the water was Roger Stone. I still don't know how many Americans are aware of this terrible man who you have, who's got this Richard Nixon tattoo on his back. But Roger Stone really epitomizes what American politics has been about for at least since the Second World War. He is the ace dirty trickster. He is the ace underhand man. He understands power. Okay, I'll give him credit for a bit of intelligence. But he is, the kind of scum that as Americans you most desperately need to target to get rid of. It's that kind of character who's destroyed your society, really, truly. And when Alex Jones got into bed with him, and that whole thing that they did, the fake fight that he arranged with Senguga, Roger Stone did that because he knew it would create publicity, because you've got these two huge men going at it. And he did it because he knew that by that stage, that people who were doing the kind of thing that you're doing now were becoming more important, much more important than the mainstream media. The alternative media was taking over. It was absolutely changing people's heads. I mean, I think that my movie in combination, well, I know that my movie in combination with all of these amazing detectives who were looking at the phony terrorism videos and pointing out what was wrong with them. All of that was what led to that very strange night when Donald Trump went off the deep end and suddenly started saying, you're fake news, you're fake news, you're fake news. The reason that happened was that the military had got together and said, look, we've really got a problem here. This goddamn Conolly dude, he's got people completely waking up to what we're really doing. And he's woken everybody up to the fact that all of these broadcasts, 9/11 and the Hamburg terror attack and the Paris, he's woken everybody up to the fact that it's just all fake news. What are we going to do? And somebody has said, well, it's obvious what we do. Like Richie Allen is saying all the time, people put out clickbait on alternative media. And they do this and they do it. And they're always looking for their own bits of attention. So they put out fake news. So we'll just say that everybody else is fake news. So it had the wonderful effect of muddying the waters completely again. Because if there's the one thing, my friends, that fascists hate more than anything else, It's clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Truth, clarity.
Does not want to be dragged into the light and kept there. Look at what's happened with Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
He gets I mean, we never ever hear the royal family talk on television. I don't know if the Americans realize this, but the Queen never says a word. She does this thing on Christmas Day for 15 minutes. It's always crap. Nobody watches it. And other than that, we never hear from her. Never. Yeah. They keep out of the limelight. The thing that they never ever want is to be dragged into the limelight and kept there. Why do you think that even though I gave him every opportunity when my movie first went viral and everybody realized it'd been watched over 1 billion times? Why do you think that even though I gave him every chance when I was on the Justin Stellman show to talk to me, Donald Trump would never appear on a live TV show, especially with a man like me, because they know that I would show him up for the gangster that he is in 10 minutes. His career would be over in 10 minutes because people, with me questioning him, with me asking the right questions, I wanted to it's reminded me of something, because this is important to me, because the British media here have done such a terrible job, because as I pointed out earlier, the lack of talent and the fact that there's just deadwood in the mainstream media now. There is a very, very obvious question, and it's the most important question of all that should have been asked during this whole Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell thing. And our media in Britain is so dumb, and I think it's the same on your side of the water, that they haven't asked the most obvious and important question of all, because they just haven't got the talent. Now, you might be thinking now, well, okay, what's that question? I'm not going to tell you. And I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to tell any of them, because I want them panicking, because they should be panicking. Because, believe me, Channel 4 and BBC, they'll all be watching this as I'm speaking. And they'll be thinking to themselves, oh, my God, what the hell is he talking about? We've missed the most obvious question of all. Yes, BBC. Yes, Channel 4, ITV. Hello, Tom Giles.
Hey, Tom, like and subscribe below, please. Would you? Please. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I've talked to the head of Channel 4, Dorothy Byrne, and they are missing the most important question of all, because they're just useless. People like you should be the mainstream media, not the BBC.
Absolutely. Down.
You care. Francis, they don't.
Francis, we're gonna kind of take it down here a notch. So we're gonna wrap it up on our end. We've got childcare stuff and all this and that. You know what I mean? So what we're gonna do, though, I want to give you an opportunity. Like since you and I have been talking, I know that there's been a development with a new something or another. You want to tell us a little bit about that with Trine Day?
Well, I hardly know how to thank you, my friends. I really don't. Oh, yeah. But yes, this is important. You might even want to arrange the editing so that you can put this at the beginning or something. Sure. I don't know. But I would like to say that there was an awful lot of people. One lady in particular who wrote a very nice pithy letter called Brianna Weaver. I'd like to say a little wave to Brianna Weaver. And
shout out to Brianna.
Because she was one amongst so many people who started to suggest to me, why don't you try to get the movie made into a book? Now, that hadn't even occurred to me that might be an idea. But because I've tried so hard for so long, and you wouldn't believe the efforts that I've made to try to get the movie into cinemas and distributed properly, and, they've just stopped me. The powers that be have stopped me. Yeah. And so I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a go. Of course, as soon as I give it a go, I discover that the book world, because it's part of the mainstream media, is just as corrupt as everything else. If you go to Macmillan, Simon & Schuster, the hypocrisy of Penguin Books has absolutely sickened me. They have made millions and millions over the years out of George Orwell's 1984, and now that we have George Orwell's 1984 happening right in front of our eyes, they won't allow the man who's done most, me, to make people aware of it, into print. Penguin wouldn't even write back to me. However, to my amazement, I had this offer from United PC, who are an Austrian conglomerate. They offered me a contract, to my great surprise. But, and it's funny because I'm actually looking at it over there, after months of negotiations about it, we finally got to the point where I was sent the contract. I printed it out. I put my signature in print, and I'm looking at it now into an envelope that's over there, and put a stamp on it. Just as I was about to post it, I get an email. We're pulling out. Somebody got to them.
Yeah.
And it was pretty devastating, let me tell you. Yeah, I mean, that's what it's like, Ed. I'm sure you can see what I've been going through. Yeah. So, here's me again. I feel like I've bashed my head against a brick wall, and I'm in pain and whatnot. So I could not be more grateful, and I hope the world will be grateful, to you, Scott, in particular, that you've put me in touch with this wonderful man called Chris Milligan, who has – I've just signed the contract and send it back to him. I got to sign the contract and send it to him this time. That's, we've got that far at least. To all those who will be cheering at this moment, I have to say, please let's temper this with a very big dollop of reality.
Yeah.
I don't know what Chris is going to face, and I don't know what I'm going to face. You can pretty much bet your life that they're going to do something to try and stop this whole thing from happening. What they're going to do, I just don't know. But it may be a way in which I might be able to raise money for part 2 of the film.
That'd be great.
And also to get, part 1 into cinemas finally. We can only hope so. But I would like people, please, to send an email, just a couple of words, just to say to Chris Milligan, and the address is it's tryandday@icloud.com. Could I just say that again, Scott, so everybody knows?
Yes, please.
Actually, I'd better spell it. It's trinedday@icloud.com. Could Brianna Weaver, because I'm sure she'll be watching this, and everybody else who's wanted to see my work put into a book form, could you please just send a quick little email to Chris to say thank you for your courage? Because I don't know what that man's going to face, but he is a very courageous man. To get into bed with a man like me, as you are, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, all right, Francis, thank you so much, man. Well, hey,
Francis.
Look, we're going to have to do a follow-up here soon.
Definitely.
I really want to get there's so much more that we could get into, and I think that part 2 of your film, covering Epstein, coronavirus, like the world needs it. So anything we can do to support you, if you ever need another platform to come speak, let us know and we'll make it happen. But man, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Very
much.
appreciative.
This has been a real nice way to spend a Sunday evening. It's very, very strange to be interviewed by 3 people. I found it slightly disconcerting at first. It's strange, but in a way, it's nicer because it's like being interviewed by a family. It's very good.
Just sitting around a table having a chat. So right on, Francis. Well, take care over there and stay strong, and we'll be in touch. All right.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Megan.
Have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Take care.
All right, everybody. That was Francis Richard Conolly. Absolutely mind-blowing. Thank you so very much for sitting in with us. I am Megan, sitting here with Scott and Ed. We wish all of you intellectual prosperity. Good night.
Bam, 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 bam.
Pew.